Zegt the Shkolim Perk Beis Mishnah Aleph. Mitzarfen Shkolim ledarkonis mipnei masei haderech. The townspeople who are sending their Shkolim to Yerushalayim are permitted to change the silver Shkolim into gold coins called darkonos. A darkon equal 2 sela or 4 Shkolim. The darkon was a gold coin of the Median or Persian Empire. It's mentioned in Ezra. Since gold is worth much more than silver, changing silver Shkolim into gold darkonos considerably reduced the number of coins being sent. So as to lighten the burden of carrying so many coins all the way up to Yerushalayim, after the darkonos arrive at the Beis HaMikdash, the Gizbarim, which are the Gaboim in the Beis HaMikdash, must convert them back into Shkolim at the expense of the Mikdash. The withdrawals of Shkolim from the Beis HaMikdash were done only with silver Shkolim, and not a mixture of different types of coins. The Mishnah teaches that even so, it's mutter for the townspeople to convert their Shkolim into darkonos to ease the burden and cost of transporting so many coins to Yerushalayim. The Mishnah now turns to the collection of Shkolim in Yerushalayim itself. The Mishnah later, in Parak Vav, teaches that 13 collection chests stood in the Azara of the Beis HaMikdash, each with a different purpose, so that anyone who visited the Beis HaMikdash could make his contributions to the appropriate fund. As related there, one of these chests was designated for the deposit of the annual Machnas HaShekel, or Shekel funds collection, as we shall see in the Mishnah. Now, Min Hastam, this is where it comes from, that a lot of shuls have pushkas, in not just floating around on the bima, but also on the walls, or in the walls, as some shuls have, so that it's very similar to this. I don't know that there's a mila in one way or the other, but if it's in the wall, the guy would have to chop out the wall in order to steal it. But just practically, it's probably better. Just as there were collection chests in the Beis HaMikdash for people to put shkolim into, the reason why these chests were called shofar is because they were wide at the bottom and narrow and curved at the top, resembling a shofar, which prevented dishonest people from putting their hands through the opening and removing coins while pretending to give money, as it states in Gemara. So too there were collection chests in the city of Yerushalayim. Those Yidden who were tamei and forbidden to enter the Beis HaMikdash were able to put their shkolim into the collection chests, spread throughout Yerushalayim. They were in different areas, I guess in different street corners. They knew where they were. In the Rambam holds that it wasn't just in Yerushalayim, but it was elsewhere around the cities of Eretz Yisrael, as it states in the Rav. If the townspeople sent their shkolim to the Beis HaMikdash with a shliach, and the coins were stolen or lost along the way, the halach is as follows. To be parted from paying, the shluchim must make a shvuah to the owners that they weren't posheya, they weren't negligent in guarding the shkolim. And who are the shkolim's owners? The Mishnah explains, Im nitra mahat truma nishbam like gizbar. If the truma for buying new karbonos had already been taken from the shkolim, from the Beis HaMikdash, from the shofars in the Mikdash, before the Gneva or the Aveda happened, the Shkolim were already the property of the Beis HaMikdash at the time of the Gneva and the Aveda. And the Shluchim must therefore make a Shvuah to the Gizbarim in the Beis HaMikdash that they weren't Posheya in guarding the Shkolim. The townspeople do not have to contribute Shkolim a second time, since their Shkolim are considered to have reached the Beis HaMikdash once the Truma has been taken. Bim Lav, but if the Truma has not yet been taken from the Beis HaMikdash at the time of the theft or the loss occurred, so that the shkolim were still considered to be the property of the townspeople when they were stolen or lost. The shluchim must swear to the townspeople that they were not negligent in guarding the shkolim, and the townspeople must then contribute new shkolim in place of the missing ones, since their donation never reached the Beis HaMikdash. If the townspeople contributed shkolim a second time, the missing shkolim were found, or the ganovim returned them, both these and those, the original shkolim and the replacement ones, are considered kodesh as shkolim and are the property of the Beis HaMikdash, even though there's an extra set of shkolim now in the Beis HaMikdash, and the additional shkolim do not count for the townspeople for the coming year's collection. Rather, the townspeople still have to donate towards next year's shkolim. Since at the time of the second set of shkolim since both sets of shkolim contributed to purchase this year's karbanos, they cannot be used for next year. Mishnah Beis. The following Mishnah discusses a number of cases in which a person uses money designated for some other purpose to fulfill his chiyuv of shekel. The first two cases involve me'ilah, which is the issur to use anything hektish for one's personal benefit or for anything for divrei chayil. For example, if a person repays a loan with money from the Beis Hamikdash that's in his possession, he is guilty of me'ilah. If he does so by mistake, the Torah requires him to bring an asham me'ilos, as well as to pay the Beis Hamikdash the value of the benefit he received plus a chaymesh. If he did so b'meizid, he is mechuyev malchus in addition to repaying what he took, but it does not have to bring an asham and does not have to add a chaymesh. The Mishnah discusses the halachas of me'ilah as it relates to shkala. So, if someone gives a shekel to his friend to act as a shliach to contribute it to the Beis Hamikdash for him, the Mishnah is referring to a case where the person was not makdash this coin as a shekel before giving it to the shliach. Had he done so, the shekel would have immediately been kodesh and subject to me'ilah. Rather, he gave the agent a regular coin of chulin, intending for it to become hektish only when the mikdash is koineh to shokli ali de atzmai, and then the shliach went and contributed this shekel for himself instead. For example, he mistakenly thought it was his own coin that he was contributing to the Beis Hamikdash. If at the time he contributed the shekel, the truma had already been withdrawn from the shayfus in the mikdash, so that the friend's shekel had already been considered belonging to the Beis Hamikdash, the shliach has committed me'ilah by using hektish, which is his friend's shekel for his own benefits, for his own hanoah. The friend's shekel became consecrated, became hektish as soon as the temple was as soon as the Beis Hamikdash was koined. The shliach benefited from it by paying it to the Beis Hamikdash because he now saves his own property from being seized by the Bezdin from taking anything in his rishus as a mashkin to pay for his shekel. If, however, the truma had not yet been withdrawn from the shliach, when the shliach contributed the friend's shekel for himself, then the shliach has not committed me'ilah, since the shekel is not yet considered belonging to the Beis Hamikdash. He's merely required to repay his friend for the shekel that he took. Hashekel shiklim emayis hektish, one who contributes a shekel from the Beis Hamikdash fund that he forgot that he previously was makdish this coin to the fund for the bedek habayis. The money in this fund is used to pay for repairs in the Beis Hamikdash called bedek habayis. The money that was used for the bedek habayis is not used for karbonos. People who donate money or property to this fund have used for the purpose of bedek habayis. This money was considered hektish, even though it wasn't designated for karbonos, and he used it to pay for his shekel. Im nisrma truma of a karva behema moal. Then later, when the truma is withdrawn from the Beis Hamikdash, from the funds, and an animal is bought with the truma funds is brought on the mizbeach, then moal, the person who gave this money, has committed a me'ilah. Although me'ilah generally occurs as soon as a person removes the hektish item from the possession of the mikdash and uses it for himself, here the shekel was not removed from the possession of the mikdash. It was merely shifted from one hektish to another. A shekel that was consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash bedek habayis was used to buy karbanos tzibur. That's a problem. The halacha in such cases is that me'ilah does not take effect until the money is actually used for that other purpose. Meaning, if it's in the Beis Hamikdash but it's in the wrong place in the Beis Hamikdash, then it's only when it gets used. Therefore, only after an animal is purchased with the shkalim funds and offered on the mizbeach is he then mechuyev in me'ilah. Even if the shekel he gave was not actually used to buy the karbonos, since the truma is taken and spent on behalf of everyone who gives a shekel, it's considered as if his money went to buy it, because even if it wasn't his coin, but because his coin was in that fund, that's already a problem. Now, the same is actually true in the first case of the Mishnah as well. There too, the friend shekel was not removed from the possession of the mikdash. It was merely used by the shliach to pay his own chiyuv of shekel. We are continued to be part of the fund in the mikdash. So the Mishnah, the halacha, the din of the Mishnah applies here too, in that case as well. In that case too, the shliach is not actually guilty of me'ilah until an animal is bought and offered from that funds that were withdrawn from the mikdash. Midmei ma'aser sheni, midmei shviyas, yochal kenegdan. If one paid a shekel with ma'aser sheni funds or with shmita funds, so ma'aser sheni and shmita funds may not be used for the shekel, for the money for the shkalim, for two reasons. Number one, these funds must be used to buy food for human consumption, while the shkalim go to buy karbanos which are burnt on the mizbeach. Number two, the machzas shekel contribution is a chiyuv, and obligations must be paid from chulin, as we learned in Menachos. So over here, he's not using chulin to pay for it. He's using something that has some other dinim to it, some kind of hektish, because it has kedusha shviyas or kedusha meiser, so he can't use it. So yochal kenegdan, he must eat food of a corresponding value to them. He does this by taking a shekel of chulin and declaring, let the Ma'aser Sheni funds or the Shemitah funds, wherever they may be right now, be redeemed onto this money. He must do this in order that the Ma'aser Sheni and Shemitah funds not be used to buy karbanos and instead be used for the proper purpose. This removes the chash of Ma'aser Sheni or Shemitah, the Kedushas Ma'aser and the Kedushas Shvius from that money that he gave for the shkalim and transfers it onto the new money. He then uses the new money to buy food, which he treats with the Kedushas Ma'aser and the Kedushas Shvius, and he has to eat it. Once the Kedusha Ma'aser Sheni or Shemitah has been removed from the funds that were used, he now automatically fulfills his obligation of the paying the shekel. Mishnah Gimel. Hamachanes Mois. One who puts aside small coins over a period of time for his chiyuv of shekel, meaning he's a poor person, let's say, and he saves a few small coins at a time towards his contribution of his shekel. Va'omar harei elu l'shikli. And he says at the time he begins saving them, I'm putting away this money for my ma'achtas shekel. When the time of the shekel contribution arrives, he finds that he had mistakenly collected more than a shekel's worth of coins. So Beishamai Omer Moshe Nedava. Beishamai say the surplus of money, the extra money remains hektish, even though he consecrated it, he was makdashed in error, and it goes to the collection chest set up in the Beis Hamikdash for Nadarim and Nedavos, which Nidvis Tzibur. Beishamai are consistent with their opinion in Nazir that hektish tos shmei hektish. A consecration made in error is nonetheless a consecration, which Beis Shammai learned out from a pasuk. Beis Hillel Emer Meisaron Chulin. Beis Hillel say the extra money is not kodesh, it's chulin. Any money over a shekel is not hektish, since he only had a mind to be makdish up to a shekel's worth of coins, and all the coins in excess of a shekel were set aside in error. There are 6 such collection chests set up in the Beis Hamikdash, and they're discussed in Parak Vav, Parak 6. Funds from these chests went to purchase karbanos oila to be made on the mizbeach at times when there were few karbanos being brought. These were not karbanos tzibur, but they were rather nidvos tzibur. Even though, according to Beis Shammai, the extra money is also hektish towards the chiyuv of shekel, cannot go to the general shekel fund, since it's also for a person to contribute more than a shekel, as the Torah says, ha'asher lo yarba. So the extra money therefore goes to purchase nidvos, nidarim and nidvos tzibur, as do certain other types of extra communal hektish money, as we'll see in Parak Dalet. She'avi mehen l'shikli, shavin shemasaron chulin. But if at the time he began putting aside the coins, he said that he was doing so in order that I will bring my shekel from them, then both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that the extra money is chulin. In this case, even Beis Shammai agree that it's as if he said explicitly that if he ends up with more than a shekel's worth of coins, he only wants a shekel's worth to be hektish and not the rest. Elu lechatos, shavin sha'amoiser nedava. A similar set of cases regarding different types of chiyuvim. If someone saves up coins to buy an animal for a chatos, and he says at the time he begins saving them up, let these be for me to buy a chatos that I'm mechuyev to bring. He was over an avera that was mechuyev him to bring a chatos as a kapara, and when he buys the animal, he discovers that he has more money than he needs. So shavin sha'amoiser nedava. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that the extra money remains hektish and is used for nadarim and nedavos. In this case, Beis Hillel agreed that the extra coins remain hektish, and the next Mishnah will explain the difference between this case and the first case of the Mishnah, where Beis Hillel hold that the extra coins is chulin. She'avi mehen lechatos. But if when he began setting aside the coins, he said that he's doing this in order that he'll be able to bring a chatos from them, shavin sha'amoiser chulin, all agree, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that the remainder of money over the animal's worth is chulin. As in the previous case in the Mishnah, by saying he'll bring the carbon from these coins, it's as if he explicitly said, and it was explicitly makdish, only the coins up to the animal's value. Mishnah Dalet. Omer Reb Shimon, ma ben shkalim lechatos. In the previous Mishnah, we learned that Beis Hillel hold that in the case of shkalim, where one saves up coins and says, let these be for my shekel obligation, any excess coins are chulin. While if he says the same for a chatos that he owes, the extra coins are kodesh, and go to buy other karbanos. So the Mishnah explains what's the difference between the cases. So Reb Shimon says, what's the difference, according to Beis Hillel, between shkalim, where the extra coins he sets aside are not kodesh, they're chulin, and the karban chatas, where the extra coins are kodesh. Shkalim, yesh lahem kitzvah, the chatas, ein la kitzvah. The difference is that shkalim have a limit. A person may not contribute more than a shekel. As we said, ha'asher layarbe. Therefore, he certainly did not have a mind to be makdish more than a shekel's worth of coins when he started saving, So the extra coins have to remain chulin. V'chatos ein lo kitzva, whereas the chatos offering has no limit. One may spend as much as he wants on an animal. There's no limit. Therefore, we say that if he intended to consecrate, to be makdish all the money, and even if there's any money left over after he buys the animal, the extra goes for other karbanos as well, it could automatically become kaddish. There's no limit into what he can give for a chatos. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Even the shkalim has no limit. When Klal Yisrael went back to Eretz Yisrael from Bavel in the times of Ezra, they used coins from Madai called Darkainis, which we mentioned earlier in Mishnah Aleph, as their basic unit of currency. So thus, for the shekel contribution, they gave half the standard coin, half a darkain, which was equal to one selah. When the Torah says that everyone must contribute a half a shekel, it doesn't mean only a half a shekel, no other coin. Rather, the mitzvah is to contribute half of the basic unit of currency used at that time. At the time the Torah was given, the unit of currency was the shekel, so the amount each yid had to contribute was half a shekel. But at different periods in history, the yidden gave half of whatever was the basic unit of currency, even if it equaled more than the Torah's machtas a shekel, which today would be half $1, or maybe even $1 because of inflation. I don't know. So thus, for their shekel contribution, they gave half of the standard coin, half a darkain, which was equal to one selah. Later, after the collapse of the Persian Empire, they switched to using sloim as the unit of currency. A selah equals 2 shkalim, as we mentioned previously. Accordingly, they changed their shekel contribution to half of the new standard coin, and they therefore gave a half a selah each. This restored the value of the payment to what it had been in the times of the Torah. The shekel of the Torah was equivalent to the selah of the Mishnah. The half shekel of the Torah was equivalent to the full shekel of the Mishnah, as we explained also. Still later, they switched to using coins called tevoin as their unit of currency, and the people wished to contribute dinarim, which is half a tevoin, for their shekel obligation. However, the Chachamim refused to accept the din for the shekel obligation because it was worth less than the half shekel of the Torah. The shekel from the Mishnah was worth 2 dinar. A dinar was therefore half the value of the shekel of the Mishnah, and thus half the value of the Torah's half a shekel. Even though it's mutter to contribute more than the value of the Torah's machtas a shekel, provided that it's half the currency that's being used at the time, it's not permitted to give less than that. This is learned from the pasuk Zeyidnu. This they shall give, but not any less than this. At any rate, we see that the shekel obligation too has no set limit, and indeed in various periods of history, the Yidden gave more than the Torah's half shekel to fulfill their mitzvah. How then can Reb Shimon say that the shekel obligation has a kitzvah? So now the Mishnah is going to go with Reb Shimon defending his explanation. Reb Shimon responds to Reb Yehuda, Aval pikin yad kulan shava. Even though it's true that the amount of the chiyuv of shekel is not completely fixed, nevertheless, everyone's share is always equal, because no matter what the currency is, no one's allowed to give more than half of it. As the Torah says, a rich man may not give more, and a poor man may not give less than half a shekel. That is, even though the community can raise the amount of the contribution by increasing the basic unit of currency, the individual can never give more or less than what the community gives. Aval chatas, but regarding a korban chatas, it's not so. That may be b'sela, that may be b'shtayim, that may be b'shalosh. This person brings the animal worth a selah, this one brings the animal worth 2 sloim, this one brings the animal worth 3 sloim. Since one may spend as much as he wants on his korban, we say that he intended to be makdish all the money he put aside, and the extra must therefore go towards purchasing other korbanos. Okay. Mishnah Hey. Moisar Shkalim Chulin. Having discussed the Mishnah Gimel, what's to be done with the extra shekel and chatas money, the Mishnah digresses to teach what's to be done with the surpluses of money collected for other purposes. The Mishnah introduces its list by repeating the halachas of Shkalim. Moisar Shkalim Chulin. The surplus of money set aside for the chiyuv hamachtas a shekel is chulin. There's no hektish to it. If someone puts aside coins for his chiyuv of shekel and finds that he had mistakenly set aside more coins than necessary, the extra coins are chulin, according to what Beis Hillel said in Mishnah Gimel. Moisar Asiris Ha'efa. The Mishnah continues its list, and in all the cases someone set aside money for a specific purpose, but finds out that he has more money than he needs. If somebody has extra money that he set aside for buying the 10th of an ephah of flour used as a korban chatos, this is a korban consisting of a 10th of an ephah of flour brought by someone who has committed particular averis and is too poor to afford an animal or a bird korban for his chatos. The 10th of an ephah, also known as the isarin, has a volume of 43 average eggs. So this is dali dalus of a carbon oil. It's b'makam achatas. Moisa kinezav and kinezav is kine yeldos. The surplus of money set aside for these karbanos, buying pairs of birds for the karbanos of zavin, zavos, and yeldos. Chatois v'hashamis, and the surplus of money set aside to buy animals of chatois and hashamis. Moisrei and nedava. This extra money goes into the nedava box. Since a person may spend as much as he wants on these karbanos, we assume that he intended to be makdish all the money set aside for them. So the extra money cannot be used to buy an additional chatas or asham, because these karbanos cannot be brought as an neder or nedava, only bechiyav to kapara ka'asi, only for a kapara. And he already had his kapara with the chatas or asham he brought with the money put aside. Rather, the extra money is placed in one of the other donation boxes in the Beis Hamikdash, whose funds are used to purchase voluntary oil karbanos to be brought on the Beis Hamikdash, on the Mizbeach, for Ketzah Mizbeach, when there were few karbanos being brought. Zahaklal. This is the general rule. Kol shehu ba l'shem chatas l'shem ashma. Any money that comes to pay for a chatas or an asham offering, ma'aser nedava, the extra money is placed in the box of an nedavis. The halacha was learned out from a pasuk by Yehoyada HaKohen, as the Mishnah will explain in Perek Vav. Even though in one of the Mishnah's cases above, the money was set aside for kinei oilas and kinei chatas, one of which is an oila. Nevertheless, since the birds are brought together as a pair, even the money for the oila has the same halacha as the money for a chatas, and the extra two goes to buy nedarim and nedavos. Meiser oila la'oila, meiser mincha la'mincha, meiser shlamim l'shlamim. Until now, the Mishnah had discussed cases where the extra funds cannot be used for their originally designated purpose. Now the Mishnah lists cases where the extra money are used for that designated purpose. If a person has extra money that he set aside for an oila, he has to use it to buy another carbon oila. Meiser mincha lemincha, the extra money set aside for carbon mincha is used to buy another carbon mincha. Meiser shlamim shlamim, the extra money that a person set aside for a carbon shlamim is used to buy another carbon shlamim. In all of these cases, the extra money can be used to buy additional karbanos of the same kind, because they're all nedarim and nedavos, and a person may bring as many of them as he wants. There's no problem of him bringing extra by a chatas. There's no problem of like shkalim, of kitzvah, none of this. Moiser pesach l'shlamim, the extra money of a carbon pesach is used to buy a carbon shlamim. The money cannot be saved for next year's carbon pesach, but must instead be used for a carbon shlamim. And where do we learn this from? Because the pasuk says, "V'zavachta pesach l'Hashem l'kechat tzonu bakar." Frekti Gemara, "V'chi pesach min habakar hu." But carbon pesach is only a sheep. So where do you have bakar in a carbon pesach? Elamaiser pesach yeh ledavar haba mitzonu bakar v'hainu shlamim. It's referring to the extra money that a person might have from his donation when he went to be makdish it, so that he could use to bring tzonu bakar, which would be all shlamim. Ma'aser nazirim lenazirim, the surplus of money collected to purchase karbanos for poor nazirim in general is used to buy karbanos for other poor nazirim. That is, the leftover money should be held until it's needed for another poor nazir. Ma'aser nazir lenadava, a nazir is someone who accepts upon himself not to have anything to do with grapes or cut his hair or become tamid lameis. At the end of his nazirus, the nazir brings 3 karbanos. He brings the oila, chatas, and a shlamim, as well as 20 loaves of matzah. Ma'aser nazir lenadava, the extra money of an individual nazir who set aside money for his own carbon and had some left over is placed in the box of nedavis. Since the money was designated for a particular nazir, it cannot be used for other nazirim. The same would be true if the money had been set aside for a specific group of nazirim. Since it had been designated for them in particular, it cannot be used for other nazirim. The Mishnah's distinction is not between an individual and a group, but between a fund for specific nazirim and a general fund for whichever nazirim may need it. What remains from a general fund may be saved for future nazirim. What remains from a fund for specific nazirim may not be saved for other nazirim, and therefore goes for voluntary communal karbanos. Meiser aniyim la'aniyim, meiser ani la'isei ani, meiser shvuyim l'shvuyim, meiser shavei l'isei shavei. Having discussed what's done with the surplus funds designated for various karbanos, the Mishnah now turns to halachas, what should be done with the surplus of funds collected for various other tzedakah funds. If you collected money for poor people in general, then you use it for other poor people if you have extra. Meiser ani la'isei ani. If the surplus of money collected for the sake of a specific poor person is given to that specific person. Tzedakah money given for a specific purpose may not be used for a different purpose. Therefore, if tzedakah was collected for poor people in general, was used to help them, and have leftover funds, the remainder should be held for other poor people in the future to be used when the need arises. But if it was collected for a specific poor man or a family and was used to help him, the extra money belongs to him and may not be given to another poor man. Even though he no longer needs the money, since at the time people donated money to this man, he was indeed poor, we assume that their kavana was that all the money, even the extra, should go specifically to him, and the same halacha applies if tzedakah is collected for a specific group of poor people. Any extra funds must go to them and not to other poor people. Mosher shvuyim l'shvuyim, the surplus of money collected for pidyon shvuyim, in general, is used for other shvuyim when the need arises. But the surplus of money collected for the redemption of a specific captive is given to that captive. Moiser hamesim lamesim, the extra money collected for the burial of a dead person, and for dead people in general, is used to bury other people too poor to afford their own kvura. Like other forms of tzedakah, money collected for levayas hameis or for kvura may not be used for a different purpose than what it was collected for. Moiser hameis liyarshav, the extra money collected to bury a specific person too poor to afford his own kvura is given to the yarshim. This extra money here obviously cannot be given to him since he's dead, and he doesn't take the money with him anyways. When tzedakah is collected publicly for someone's kvura, the nifter suffers a great bizayin, and we can assume that he only forgave such a slight to his covet for the sake of his children or other yarshim, so the extra money should go to them. Remeir says that the extra money collected for a dead person must be set aside until Eliyahu Navi comes at the end of days, and paskins on this undecided point of halacha. Remeir is not sure whether it can be assumed that the nifter forgoes his honor on behalf of the yarshim. He therefore rules that no one may touch the money until Eliyahu Navi comes and is miyashav what to do with it. With the extra money collected for a dead person, they build a monument for him on his grave. Rav Nosson holds that the nifter certainly does not forgive the bizayin that he had for the yarshim, and the extra money must therefore go to honor him by building a monument, a tombstone, to perpetuate his memory. And I would add that if you have any extra money after this, then you should buy food to give out by his kever, Reb Shai ben Amaisha. Anyways, this is the end of this parak, and to be continued.